All right, welcome to Good News York, episode 58. I am Mike Brindisi on this episode of Good News York, sponsored by Ads on the Go. Get adsonthego.com. Shout out to Zach Primo, the man out there in the box truck. As you can see, I'm flying solo today. Matt's out, I don't know, rummaging through dumpsters looking for old electronics, and I am here with my man Danny Tripodi behind the board. I'm going to have a chance today to sit down with Dan Smalls of Dan Smalls Presents, or DSP Shows. I live in Ithaca, New York. Dan Smalls, the premier promoter in that area, but also has grown so much that he's now one of the premier promoters all over New York State, even in Massachusetts. We're going to talk all about his journey to where he's gotten, and much, much more about the music business and other things as well. So stay with us. When we come back, Dan Smalls, DSP Shows, right here on Good News York. Welcome back to Good News York, episode 58, brought to you by Ads on the Go. Get adsonthego.com. I'm Mike Brindisi, here with a very special guest, a friend of mine, one of the biggest concert promoters in New York, maybe even the Northeast. Dan Smalls from DSP Shows, or Dan Smalls Presents. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure to be here. Always love to talk to my brethren in the industry, as we say.
I appreciate that. You look great. Very rock star of you to be in a hotel while you're doing your interview. I love that.
It is family time for sure, and business time at the same time. So thanks for making it happen this way.
Yeah, man, of course. And I mean, I think that's, being a concert promoter allows you, as busy as you always are, I do find that it does allow you to also kind of have that work-life balance, right? You aren't really missing any of your kids' games and things of that nature, I assume.
Yeah, I've had to earn it for sure. As we've grown, we've added wonderful staff, and it's really allowed me to create a company that supports the kind of lifestyle that I want to have, that my people want to have. And, we've worked hard for this for sure, but your boy's only 17 once and getting recruited to college once, so you might as well try to be there for every possible moment, and that's what I'm doing. That's where we are now. We're at a baseball tournament, but happy to make the time between games to rap.
Wow, that means a lot, man. And yeah, there's nothing more important, nothing better than being a dad. And I've had a front row seat to watch you grow right before my eyes. I think it was 2008, all of a sudden Dan Smalls was on the scene. And I mean, you grew from your inception. It was just rapid. And, and now I see, I watched when you were adding more employees and moving into new spaces. I remember meeting with you when you were working out of your apartment downtown. And I'm just so happy for you. I know you started in 2008. You had come from the Catskills. I want to talk about a little bit how this all came about. You came from the Catskills up to Cornell, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really long story that we can do a short version of. But I came to college in 1988, if you could believe it, and came to Cornell and didn't have a real plan. I was studying engineering because I was good at math and science, although high school came easy to me. And they said, go be an engineer. But I picked Cornell because it had other options in case I was wrong. And on my second or third night, I heard some music coming out of a fraternity across the street, and go over there, and this band just out of high school called Blues Travelers playing. And next thing I know, I'm hanging out with them. We made friends. I started, helping them get more shows up this way. And through them, we met the Spin Doctors, and they were coming to town, and I got this reputation as the guy to call when you want to, no one knew what a jam band was at that point. There was still the Grateful Dead touring and all that kind of stuff, but the jam band scene wasn't really a thing. So that's kind of how it all started. And, we did a big benefit show for the Finger Lakes Land Trust, which had just gotten going with Blues Traveler and Spin Doctors at Bailey Hall before it was redone, and sold it out and made some money. And it's a very funny story. I was left with a few $1,000 in cash, and I thought I'd be a good kid and went to the bursar's office and tried to pay down my bill so my parents would be surprised. And they summarily sent me packing with my cash, saying, "Where'd you get this?" drug
Yeah.
dealer, Dan, get the hell out of here. So that happened. And I quickly learned that going from a 4.0 high school to a 1.9 first semester wasn't going to work. I got to get out of engineering, moved into business management, marketing, and that's where it started. And then I wound up meeting John Peterson at the Haunt, which was the club in town at the time on Green Street still. And he was, putting on the best blues and reggae shows that had ever, I hadn't seen in my life. I was down there, and one night I'd see Buddy Guy and then Albert Collins and all those alligator bands with the same backing band and just another smoking guitar player in front of him every week. And it was just life-changing for me to go to work for him and start learning the business. And he let me take chances. He believed in me when I told him to book Pearl Jam or whatever on a Monday night for $200 or $300, whatever we paid him. And it was a great time, the industry was wide open. I think, music was changing, and I was just really, really lucky to work with him at that point. And the big thing came the summer of my sophomore or junior year. I can't remember which. And I saw they were doing a music festival with all these bands. And I should back up and say, while I was working at the Haunt, Fish came, and the first time they played, 3 people came to see them.
Jeez.
Trey called us like, we're killing it in Vermont, and we got to come down for 3 nights like we do here. And they came, and there was 3 people, and the next night there was 8 people. And then I think we put a local band on, and they did like 40 or something. So,
Wow.
They were growing at the same time. It was really quite entertaining to watch. And some of my best friends in the biz to this day, so that happened. But that summer came along, and I saw they were doing a music festival down in Parksville, New York, of all places. It was where Route 17 had a stoplight.
Yeah.
It's no longer there, but right off that stoplight, 2 miles, was this place called Arrowhead Ranch. And I found out about it. I drove down there, met with the guy in charge, talked my way into a job. Turned out that his partner was David Graham and all of his friends from NYU. And David's dad was Bill Graham, the famous rock impresario, concert promoter, Fillmore East, Fillmore West,
Yeah.
Wonderland, whatever. So I'm down there working for the summer. And one of the first days, the sheriff comes to try to shut the whole thing down. And I know the guy since I'm 4 years old. Joe, how are you, Sheriff Joe? And Bill's watching the whole thing that weekend, So weekend comes to an end, and I should back up and say those guys were wonderful, but they were older than me, and they were, doing more drugs than I would do.
Sure.
They're just, and so Bill takes the dinner, and he says, Cornell, come here. And he takes me to the bar. He's like, my kids are all fuck ups. I want you to come work for me when you graduate. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, Bill.
Okay.
And crazy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
small. The irony is when he escaped Germany and came over on a boat and was in Brooklyn, he would come up and spend summers in the Catskills, right near where I grew up, near Monticello. And he worked at the Concord Hotel. So we shared this like connection of where we were from. And so I came back to college thinking my life was set. And all my friends are interviewing for jobs, and I'm like laughing in their face. And Bill gets in a helicopter about a month before I graduated Cornell and crashed on the way to a Huey Lewis show in San Francisco and passed away tragically. And that was it for my job up there, So it was a restart. Let's just put it that way. So I stayed in Ithaca for another year or 2, year and a half, helped with the Haunt. And then because of my connection with Spin Doctors and Blues Traveler, I got offered a job in New York at Columbia Epic Records. And it was A&R. It was kind of cool. But to me, once I got there, it was the era of just shipping tons of records and bean counting, and way more corporate than I was really felt was my style, So the next phase was I like to call it the Goodwill Hunting phase. I met a girl, had to see about a girl, and went to Boston and talked my way into another job. And it's funny how you just meet people, and that's how your thing later, bro. And through the guys that I worked with in this job booking a college band called Angry Salad, of all things, you wouldn't believe they had they eventually got signed and had a decent hit or whatever in that era. But through them, I met a guy named Dave Werlin, who was a promoter, and he had a ton of fish history as well. His company was called Great Northeast. And he and I worked with him when we presented the first 5 or 6 of Fish's camping festivals for the weekend, starting in Clifford Ball, Great Wet, Lemon Wheel. Got very, very lucky to be a part of those. They were just life-changing events. There were no festivals in the U.S. in 1996.
No.
And so that experience was like insane. And you can come back and question any of this, but I'm going to get through to Ithaca.
Keep going, man. This is great.
Yeah. So that happened, and we worked together, and it was great. And but then the industry roll-up happened right around 1999 when SFX, Bob Sillerman bought Delsner Slater, and he bought Bill Graham Presents, and he bought the guys in Colorado and Chicago and everyone. He rolled it up into SFX, which became Clear Channel, which is now Live Nation, right? So that was the beginning of the consolidation of the music industry. And independent promoters like, Great Northeast, we didn't just do the Fish Festivals. We did about, 200 or so shows a year at the Middle East and Boston, but we were more like the guys who booked Portland, Maine, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Burlington, Vermont. We were the surrounding cities with the same act. So we did a lot of shows that way, but the roll up left independent promoters out in the cold for the most part. We were nervous. Agents were afraid of what Live Nation was going to become. And it was a really good time to take a break. So that's when I wound up back in the Catskills to help get Bethel Woods started. And at the same time, I had grown up there, we helped get Bethel Woods, the guy that bought the Woodstock site, built this beautiful place. And around the same time, my dad was ill, and I helped run his business once Bethel Woods was up and running, and thought I could get out of the music biz. I thought it was it for me, and helped him with that, helped him sell it. And, in a similar Goodwill Hunting way, I visited Ithaca and met my wife on one of those trips. So we sold the biz, and I moved up there without a prayer of what I was going to do next. Thought I was done with music. But like you said, right around 2005-06, the State Theater was in peril. It was really close to closing. They had brought in an executive director who really tried to make it into like a cultural mecca, like doing the kind of things Cornell could do with a $10 ticket with a $60 ticket.
Yeah.
It ran the debt through the roof in 1 year, So I met the executive director of Historic Ithaca and said, I can fix this, I think. Give me a shot. And we went in, and it was a mess, and the debt was huge. And I quickly saw they were not able to escrow money to cover bills and pay. It was a really hard time. So I met some local folks, business people. We met with the city. We met with all kinds of things. And we came up with a very creative deal with the IURA helping and stuff too. The Clinton House was part of it, and it spun Historic Ithaca into their own thing, and the State Theater of Ithaca, Inc. into its own thing. And we took it over as a new not-for-profit running just the theater. And for a year and a half, I did my job booking it and Doug Levine's job of running it. And I realized very quickly I could not do both. So I was the guy that said, hey, let's give Doug a shot, because the way buildings like that make sense is you start by raising tons of sponsorship, and then you get good at raising funds to do bigger projects. And Doug was working at the Chamber of Commerce as the membership guy. I'm like, he knows everybody. He'll be able to bring in enough money. And it felt like a real symbiotic thing. And it's taken a long time to become that. But now to bring it full circle, it's become that for sure in Ithaca. But in the years since 2007, when I formed DSP till now, I've grown, like you said, tremendously. It's been awesome. I started by growing too fast and then pulled back, and it was just me. And then I wound up having a friend who was sort of like the me of Western Massachusetts, working for a guy he didn't like. His name was John Sanders. And after several years of trying to convince him, John finally said, I can't work for this guy anymore. I'm in. Let's do it. And I gave him a very creative way to become a part of the company, and we worked that out together. And now we're 8 people and 69 shows in 2008 and 812 shows last year.
My God. I remember when you and John teamed up, and I remember kind of from my point of view, the explosion of DSP shows from there. Not that it wasn't, you were doing just fine before that, but that's when it went to the next tier for sure.
We had opportunities in Massachusetts that came with him. And the minute he left working for someone that the industry as a whole had, I don't talk bad about folks, but they didn't enjoy working with him the way they enjoy working with John and I. Like I've always been a promoter who will go the extra mile. I'd rather put more catering in your room and spend a few extra dollars to have a better relationship. I mean, I know these touring acts live on a bus and they sleep while they're driving, and they come into these dingy basements and that's their house. Yeah. So why not try to make it a little better for them?
Absolutely.
And that's been our mentality. And I think our growth has happened because we treated people better, and they've said, hey, when we go to the Northeast, we want to play for these guys.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality. Treat people better, and you'll let money follow. Don't let be a goal,
You know what? You're so right, because I tell people all the time that, any success I've had in my life is by building relationships. And a lot of those were relationships that were built because they were just relationships and, ended up coming full circle later on where it ended up helping me in business, you know, but they were meant as just relationships to begin with. And you made so many relationships along the way, and it's been so key for you. And I knew that kind of your mantra when you had started out was that you wanted to go the extra mile to do what other promoters weren't doing, which was really being for the artist. And as someone, you know, I had my band and you and I have worked together, I can attest that you always took care of me and my band and any artists that I know that has worked with you. So
yeah, thank you. I mean, it's how it works. I mean, look, I would not have been able to save the State Theater if I didn't know agents from years ago. And those couple of years that I took away, they all moved up. You know, when I called them, like, holy shit, Dan, where have you been? What have you been doing? And we had that great conversation. I'm like, hey, I got this really righteous thing. I've saved this awesome building. And yeah, I still remember 2008 when I got Lyle to come with John Hyatt and Lyle Lovett's on stage. And you know, he gave this whole speech about how saving buildings like this is something that should be done. There's too many that are 7-Elevens. And there I was in the back of the thing with the tear coming down in my eye, you know, like, right on, dude. Thank you for noticing, because it's a really cool thing, you know.
Man. What a journey.
You know, you're right.
What a journey. I moved to Ithaca from the Mohawk Valley in 2005, actually, right around the same time. And at the time, long story short, I knew I needed to get out of there. I couldn't afford to live in New York or LA. I knew I needed to be somewhere where there was some sort of creative scene in music and comedy. And, you know, a buddy of mine lived in Ithaca and said, you got to come here. Like, just live here for a couple years and go to the city. It's so cultured. You know, there's a ton of culture. It's a huge music scene. And I was pleasantly surprised to know that this person was so right. And but you're responsible for a lot of that. I know that now. But before you know, on your way to Ithaca, from your perspective, was Ithaca known that way for you before you had gotten there?
It wasn't when I was here. It was when I was there in college, for sure. I mean, John had built that, and people before him at the North 40 and places like that, where the, you know, Buffalongo and bands like in Orleans were playing around town in the 70s and stuff. So it had a great scene. The Rongo, you know, places, amazing. That people would drive those 10 miles and drink all night and then drive back to college.
Oh yeah,
you know, it's just different times for sure. So and the reputation, like I give John Peterson a lot of credit, and he and I are friends to this day. He has a house now up near Sheldrake, up that way, and in summers comes up and visits, and we're still friends. But he taught me the biz. He let me lose money and you know, drain my bank account and live off a sack of potatoes from the farmer's market for a couple of weeks until I could get them up.
Yeah,
you know,
man.
But he taught me a lot about the biz. Like I grew up in a musical family, for sure. My dad, no one played, but they listened to a lot of great music. My dad was like playing Mississippi John Hurt and you know, was friends with Arlo Guthrie for a minute back in the 60s in the Village and stuff. So it was kind of cool to bring them back together. But anyway, long story short, it was just, it's relationship based. Like you said, that's where this whole thing started. And I think that's how you continue to
I mean, Ithaca is a special place. I tell people that all the time. And, you know, you're talking about John and how he got you started. You know, living in Ithaca, I heard all those stories about these magical nights at the Haunt. I actually remember being at a reggae night somewhere, and the band actually sang a song. I don't know if they wrote it or they were covering it, about a night where a band came and played in Ithaca. The song is about that night. And, you know, there's the story of obviously John Popper and Blues Traveler playing there. And now, is this true? I heard Pearl Jam had played there. This was right before they broke out, and they played on like a Tuesday night, and there was barely anybody there.
It was a Monday night, actually. It was Don Muller called us, and Don was a huge agent at the time. They were opening for the Chili Peppers, and they had an off night.
Jeez.
And they needed a few $100 to cover gas. And you know, their sound check was, you know, messy and whatever. Sure. And then the show started, and it was just awesome. It was huge. And the guys they were so poor at the time that Eddie's pants were being held up with duct tape tied in a knot. You know what I mean? It was that bad. Yeah. And it was cool. And I was like, they started playing, and I was like, whoa, stop. Let me call everyone I know.
Yeah.
You know? And we wound up having like, I think 50 people maybe when they played, and it was legendary. It was so loud and so cool. And those dudes were great. And then we sat at the bar and did Jägermeister shots for, you know, till it was way too late.
You know, I'm so envious.
It was a good.
Yeah, I'm so envious of you in that way because I always said one thing I can't say I've done is, I meet so many people that go, oh, dude, I saw, Pearl Jam on a Monday night before they were big, or I saw John Mayer in Boston before he blew up. That's never happened to me. And I'm assuming you've probably experienced that quite a bit, especially back then. People got to remember in the early 90s, that the whole grunge invasion, the reason you were calling all your buddies was probably because this was a sound that wasn't really popular at the time. You're like, what the fuck is this? And I got to get people down here. So you probably experienced that quite a bit, I'm assuming, in the 90s especially.
There were so many bands that played there that had no business playing there, but then it was the second wave of it that was really kind of cool too. We became established as a place like, Throwing Muses and Belly with Tanya Donnelly came through, and Soul Asylum came through, and it was that kind of band that was touring, and they probably were doing between 500 and 700, maybe 1,000 in New York City, but that was worth 350 upstate, and that's how it worked. And I knew we were centrally located between, Toronto and Buffalo and New York and Philly and Boston. Like we were right in the middle. So if you need an off night, I'm your guy, and look, the same thing happened with reinvigorating the state. I called, Frank Riley at High Road, and I called CAA and William Morris. I'm like, I'll be your Monday night guy. You need that fill-in. I promise you this town is starved and we will do okay. It might not last forever, but let's start that way. And I gave him way more money than I had to my name to do, Three Girls and Their Buddy, which was Emmylou Harris, Sean Colvin, Patty Griffin and Buddy Miller. And we did that on a Monday night and sold it out. And I called John Prine's agent, and people I'd worked with for years and years and years, and said, come, I'm your Monday. And like, John doesn't work on Mondays. I'm like, okay, the first one time you want to do a Wednesday before your Friday, Saturday, I'll be your guy for that, So, I don't know. I took a lot of risk early on when I started the company. I did. I didn't have the money to liquid, to do it, but I got very lucky. I booked John, and I booked Three Girls, and I booked, even bands like Stars, who were huge at the time in the indie scene. I went up to Cornell and got them to partner with me, and we gave a discount to kids. Like, I was really creative in how I got going in the early days, and it worked out. But the town was also starved for music. Like you said, it was huge in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And there was a little bit of a down period where the State Theater went through some issues, and the guys from Syracuse weren't coming down anymore, doing 1 or 2 shows a year. And I'm like, that's not enough. I might have upset a few folks by getting started, but it's not like I was trying to take away someone's business. It was, okay, I'm going to save this building, and then I'm going to be aggressive at saying Ithaca is a better place to play than some other markets for a while. And that's how we proved it. And that's how the relationships got it off the ground. And, we do shows in Syracuse and Rochester and Buffalo and wherever. We book rooms there now, but this always home. It's close to home. I spent many a night suffering trying to get that building off the ground again. And I think, like you said, it was relationship based, but it was also a town that had once been strong. Tons of musicians live there and still do. Yeah. But it took a while to sort of resurrect that, and I'm glad that it's there again. I think there's watching bands like Ex Ambassadors come along and pop out of Ithaca. That was all testament to the work we did in 2002, 3, 4, 5 to save this building and have them have that success,
Yeah, man. Absolutely. And from my point of view, again, what you've done for the scene in Ithaca and now the whole region and then some, I'm so appreciative. And, the business has changed so much, but also, I remember going to the first, my first couple of State Theater shows. And like you said, it was a Monday or Tuesday. And I had friends that would be like, why are they doing shows on Monday or Tuesday? And I had to explain, you got to understand, they do the big markets on the weekends. But I've noticed, man, especially since the pandemic, correct me if I'm wrong, dude, I've been seeing Friday night, Saturday night shows, big acts. And I saw Nate Bargatze. You think that's a product of the name you've built and the trust that you've built, that now they're saying, hey, because the market hasn't really changed. It's still the same size. Yeah. How are you able to now get them on these hotter nights?
Yeah, I think it's helped. I mean, thank you for saying that.
No, I mean
I try to live a humble life for sure, but we've worked hard to establish it. And look, we're only as good as our results. If people weren't coming to the shows, they'd find other markets. There's, in secondary / tertiary markets, which Ithaca might be,
sure.
There's 7 offers for every date. So you have to, for an agent to sift through. And, I've developed those relationships with agents, but also managers of these acts, and they know, like if we're sold out with the Indigo Girls early on, I'm not just going to get them what's on their rider. I'm going to call the manager in Atlanta and say, hey, what are they into right now? Like, oh, Amy's reading about Civil War generals, and boom, I'm going to run over and buy a book on some crazy war general. Like the little things that when Lyle Lovett first came, Shinerbach wasn't sold in New York. I called my friend in Austin and said, send me a 12 pack, please. And, wrap it really well. And he showed up, and that was in his dressing room. And he's like, Smalls, you son of a bitch, because we've known each other forever. Like I've known him since I did my shows with him in Portland and Burlington and wherever else we did. So, it's the little things that people remember. And
100%.
Most guys are too caught up in making the almighty dollar to really focus on that. And I think that's what we've done differently.
100%. And those are two great examples of just going the extra mile. And like you said, when you were starting, you were finding creative ways to get artists there, and thinking outside the box. And I know personally, and obviously, how much the industry has changed in the last 10, 15 years, even 5 years. So I'm going to assume, have you had to get a lot more creative these days with acts because of the way the business model's changed?
Yeah, I mean, Live Nation, AEG, they're multinational corporations, right? Yeah. And they used to just buy they buy the whole tour and stick it in amphitheaters. Then they buy the whole tour and stick it in, 4,000 seat theaters. Now they're buying tours sometimes that fit in the State Theater. Nate Bargatze, for example, does all his shows with Outback Presents, but I know those guys, and we called Outback and said, hey, Nate's got to play the State. Let's do it. So I'd rather take half of something than 100% of nothing. Right. So I go out and I've got good relationships with those companies. I mean, it's not like Live Nation hasn't made an offer yet. They like to buy people up, and we've been very lucky to be, we don't really report to Polestar much anymore, but when we did, and they told us how, on their yearly ticket sales, we were ranked in the top 40 independent promoters in the world. Amazing. The last time they did that in the fucking world. And I sit in my house and I'm like, what? Yeah, it's the first time we were ranked 99, I think. And it just kept moving up, and it was insane. Like, cause we just do so much volume based on ticket. It's not dollars, it's ticket sales, right? We move a lot of tickets at the lower level and stuff. So, working with those companies will drive more business into a room like that. We have comedy, like a lot of the comedy tours are bought by the entire thing. Like we partner with AEG, we partner with Live Nation, we partner with any of them, and it's a great way to put more in the room. It's also a great way to not lose acts you have history with. We used to do all the Ray LaMontagne shows around here. Those last number of tours have been with Live Nation. So every once in a while we can buy one out, but sometimes we get a little piece of one here and there. And same thing with Bob Dylan, he does most of his stuff with AEG, but his manager Kramer loves us, and he always finds 2 or 3 markets to include us in with that. It's just, it's the little things like that. And that, like you said, that comes from relationships and reputation, but also being willing to work with, the parameters that have changed over these years. Because look, I say this a lot, and it's changed over the years because my kid gets older and older, but their stockholders are Saudi princes and Wall Street, and mine is 17 years old, went 2 for 3 today.
There you go. Yeah. Well, listen, and Live Nation's not buying Shinerbach and Civil War novels for their artists either. Let's be honest.
Right.
Right. No, that's amazing, man. And, you and I kind of talked, and we'll talk about your son in a second. I want to talk about that. But sure. You and I have kind of talked off air before about there's this myth with concert promoters, I think, where there's a couple things. One, they're always jerks, right? And I think a part of that is because, you're trying to talk to them when they're in the middle of their livelihood. And then number two, they've got such an easy job. They book bands, they get to enjoy shows. I would love for you to dispel both those rumors, because I know that's not true.
Well, I mean, look, some people might think I'm a jerk, but I'm being a jerk to respect the rules of the industry. I don't get to pick the opening acts for every show. I know most bands that are touring at the level that play the State, that manager manages someone else, and they're putting their act on that bill or a favor to someone else. And, local musicians often think I'm a bad guy for that. I mean, look, John Peterson was not loved when he ran the Haunt.
Yeah.
Okay. He is now. He's respected. Everybody puts him up on the wall.
Sure.
So I'm that now. I'm probably not loved. And I'm okay with that, because I look in the mirror every night and I love the person I see, because I know how I do business. I know how I treat people, and I could give a shit what anyone thinks about me.
Good.
Really. I know what I'm doing to make this industry. I know the risks that I take on a daily basis. And sometimes I book shows I know we're going to lose just to have volume at the state. I used to get upset when I lost $100 a show.
Sure.
Then I get upset when I lost $1,000 a show. There have been shows where we've lost $10,000. Now, I know that I have to look at the whole year. When you do 12 or $15 million in business in a year, you're going to have some really ugly nights. And if you look at them on a one-off basis, it sucks. But if you look at it like, okay, I did this show with this guy that I love and I've worked with before, and nobody came this time, and we lost $60,000. I mean, it's a huge amount of money, but that's when the act, because they respect you, will give you most of that back. And you don't even have to ask. They don't want to see you get hurt because they want to work with you, right?
Yeah.
So, look, I could worry about what they think, or I could just keep trying to do the right thing. And like, it was funny. I was at a party a couple of weeks ago, and I hadn't seen Brian Wilson, in a long time. And he's an industry guy. He's a drummer. He's amazing. He's toured with all kinds of Jamie Liddell and all kinds of national tours. And he's the one guy who gets it, because he's been out there doing it. You know what I mean? He's been on the road. He knows how shitty it can be. He knows how promoters can have a hard time. And I love talking to that dude, because he sees the picture, and I don't get to share that. And I get to share that with you, because, we can, you've been around that kind of stuff.
For
but,
sure.
I don't have to defend what we do or who we do. I gamble for your enjoyment. That's my job. I gamble for everyone else's enjoyment. And I'm pretty good at it, because I've been doing it for 38 years. And I like the people that I work with. And I like there's nothing better than standing in the wings, watching the act come on and the fans connect. And whether I've made money or lost, whether it's 10 tickets, 100, 1,000, 10,000, that moment happens at every show, because somebody's really psyched to be there, and the fact that I can do that, it's really cool.
And the fact that you still get enjoyment out of that is even bigger, I think, because this business can really kind of ruin things for you sometimes. I want to be clear, by the way, I wasn't saying that people think you're an asshole. I meant like promoters. I hope you know that. I meant promoters across the board.
No, in general, you're right, though, because a lot of them, are you look at the fees on tickets in most places, and you look at that stuff, and you just think that guys are trying to squeeze it out of you. You go to the amphitheater and the beer's $18. I mean, fuck that. You come to Omegang or Beacon Skip, and we're selling you $8, $9 16-ounce beer.
Hell yeah,
that's the going rate in a bar. It's like, come on.
Yeah, man.
How ridiculous can you get? How can you rip people off anymore? Like I said, I gotta like the guy I see in the mirror every night.
I love that. I love
hopefully that dispels part one. I'm trying to remember the other part.
Don't worry about it. You dispelled it all. Do you think?
No, I wanted to answer that part.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
What was the second part?
I wish I remembered. No. It was just that, like, putting on a concert's all fun and games. Like, you just book the band, and then you sit back and watch the show.
I mean, look, Backstage is a dingy hole most of the time. Let's be honest. The bands are not back there. It's not Almost Famous. There's no, groupies.
Nope.
There's no sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's just a bunch of guys saying, "What's the words to this song?" So I don't fuck it up on stage. No, it's rarely like that. But I mean, look, the era's changed. Touring is where everyone makes their most money. They have these great buses. It's their home. It's way more comfortable. I get it. But I can't tell you how many times people ask, "Hey, can I meet the band? Can I get a backstage pass?" I'm like, I almost want to give you a backstage pass. You come back and be like, "This sucks.
Yeah, this isn't fun. Where's the party?" You're like, "It's not."
As shit at shows. I'm sitting in some dingy, musty room with a computer doing my work for the day.
Exactly.
And if somebody walks by, it's on its way to the stage.
Yes. Yeah.
But to me,
go ahead.
I don't seek it out. I've learned a long time ago, the most important thing you can do is turn the fan off on day, the fan inside of you, because they're the same people. And maybe it's because I grew up with a dad who was a plumbing, heating, and air conditioning contractor, right? That guy's shit smells just as bad as yours, he used to say, right? And like, if you just treat people, they're people. And that's why I've had these relationships with them, and that sticks in my head. I never really say it out loud. I'm not sure I should have.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's funny. They're who they are, and you just treat them with respect. And one of my best moments, I wanted to work with Ray Davies from the Kinks forever and ever and ever. And I finally got a show with him, and I stay away from Backstage. I don't even bring gigs. And his wife comes up and says, "Who's the promoter?" after the show. Ray had such a good day. He wants to have a drink with the promoter. Who is it? I'm like, "Well, that's me. Let's go." I was super happy to get invited back to that. I don't expect it. I don't, but is it cool to have friends who are touring musicians? Sure. But they're people to me, they are who they are. And I'm lucky. I'm very lucky, but some of them, there's nothing worse than meeting someone whose music you love and then they're having a bad day.
Yeah.
And it can change your whole opinion of them, you know? So I try to stay away from it so I can keep this image that got me excited about this business. And I'm still excited about it this many years later, you know?
And I love that, man. It's infectious. And, you got me thinking, because I was going to ask you, at your level, do you still, because what you got me thinking about is, here I am thinking, man, I got to talk to him about how it must be a struggle now with how the industry's changed. And I'm realizing actually it's a struggle for labels and artists themselves, but the touring market is probably hotter than ever because that's how you make the money now.
Totally.
I guess A, would you agree with that? And then B, at your level, as successful as you are, do you still have those nights where you kind of maybe not take a bath, but you're like, yeah, this was not a good show?
Oh yeah, they happen all the time. I mean, I had one in the State Theater this spring that was well into the 5 figures, and it hurt. It was not something we expected. But no, that is you're dead on. That's how the industry is right now. And like I said, I have to look at the big picture. You can't look at my dad taught me a lot of things in life, and one was you can't look at one job that he bid and lost on. You look at the whole year. And you got to treat the losses like the wins. Like even though we lost a ton of money on that show, I didn't cut the catering rider. I didn't ask them for a reduction. I didn't try to cut sound and lights. I said, we're going to put on a professional kick-ass show here, and so be it, and that's how it goes. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And luckily we're right 85% of the time. And most of the losses are expected at the lower club level where you're building an act,
Absolutely.
There's nothing makes me happier than the first time I worked with the Avett Brothers, after I saw them at Grassroots on the first show, or whatever, they came to the state and 300 or 400 people came, and then 600 people came, then 800 people came. Then they wrote I Am Loving You, and all the grizzled hippies out by the bus turned into 12-year-old girls. And then they sold out the State Theater, and it's just one thing led to another. And now we do 4,000, a night for 2 nights at Beacon Skip or Omegang every couple of summers. And watching good people have success like that has been really awesome.
Yeah.
And to bring it, not to just bring it around to baseball, but they're such nice dudes that when we did the last shows at Omegang, they know my boy's a shortstop, and the Cal Ripken Foundation was in town and came backstage with these signed Cal jerseys and gave them to Scott and Seth. And the next morning, Wiley we had missed his first travel game that weekend because we were stretched so thin as a company. And Scott comes back and says, "Give this to your shortstop. I'm not an Orioles fan." And, those moments, just happen sporadically out of the blue because of the relationships you build. I want to keep coming back to that because that's what this is about. Most people can think that, okay, I'm running a theater now. I can go book all the bands in the world. Of course you can. You could be the best, but you can book all the bands in the world you want, but you will pay more than me because you don't know what you're supposed to pay. Right. So anybody can book it, but agents are lovely, but they also can be agents, the same way you say promoters have a bad rep. Some agents are out there to make the most for their client. And if you're not smart enough to know the difference, you're going to get hurt in this biz,
Well, I want to talk about your son and some other stuff before I let you go. I got to ask you one hacky question. I have to do it. I didn't want to, but I have to. Is there at this level, at this stage of the game, can you think of like a holy shit moment, like your favorite show, or like a moment you were blown away, or you're like, this is insane? Because you see so many.
It's hard. I think one of my proudest moments, I'm only thinking of it because I see the hat in the screen, but pulling off Cayuga Sound with Ex Ambassadors was a huge thing for us. Doing that festival in Stewart Park with the Roots and all those great bands was great. But it wasn't just that it was great. It was that they decided to make no money, and so did we. And we were left with like $60-some thousand at the end, and we divided it among 5 children's charities in Ithaca that work with the arts and stuff like that. We gave every dime away, and most festivals in year one lose a ton of money. We were able to raise enough to help Southside Community Center and Youth Farm Project and things like that were just awesome. And I brought Wiley with me to hand those checks off and watch people like lose their mind when they got $7,000 they didn't expect,
I have goosebumps.
Very cool.
I live there. So I'm so appreciative of what you do for not only the scene as an artist, as a performer myself, I appreciate what you do, but as a fan and as a citizen of the community, just everything that you do for the community, including obviously the shows, but the money that you put back into the community, it's so appreciated, man.
Thank you for noticing, because a lot of people don't. I don't think people do as much. There was a really nice little run a couple of years ago where we won the couple awards that you'd ever think about, like the
Sure.
downtown Ithaca gave us
Yep.
the Entrepreneur of the Year, and then the Chamber did that for me the next year. It was really cool. The videos they shot were really awesome, and it's funny because when you see yourself doing interviews, you don't realize that you say the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But that Chamber video was really cool because my feelings about how I run the company, and how we run the company, I should say, because it's not just me anymore, is they come across, and it's wholesome, and it's heartfelt, and it's real, and it's like, it's different than when money's your motivator. You
Absolutely.
want to put on great shows and take really good care of the people who pay to see the acts and come to, it's how it works. It's how it grows. So I'm very thankful. I love the people that work for us. There's 8 of us now. They're all in Western Mass doing a festival right now, and a couple of Chris Mazur and a few other people are
My boy.
prepared for Warren Zeter's sold out at Beak tomorrow night and Waxahachie Saturday. So, and here I am in
Jersey.
Flemington, New Jersey at Diamond Nation.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you're down there. With shout out to Chris Mazur, by the way. I love him. God, I love him.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're down there with your son, who is playing college ball, or high school ball, and he's looking to go to college, correct?
Correct. Being recruited as we speak. Yeah.
It's amazing. He plays shortstop?
Yeah. He does. Yeah. We had we're down for, this is a really big scouting thing. There were a couple hundred colleges there today watching. It's a really cool complex with fields like in 4 different directions, and this building in the middle with, a platform, and you just watch the coaches sort of walking around and checking out all the games. It was really cool.
Is he? Does he have any sort of? Does he have his sights set on a specific handful of colleges he wants to go to, or is he just like, hey, whoever will take me?
It's a bit of both. I think we're in the middle of it right now and just learning. I mean, you see the smile on my face.
Yes, I do. Proud dad.
It's really fun. Yeah, it's great. And I'm just, like I said, I'm super thankful for the people that work, with us to pull off these shows that I, could say to them this year at our Christmas and holiday parties that, I might be a little sparse this spring, but it's, I got one kid and this is the time that I'm going to be with him. So, and they're pulling off a wonderful festival in Greenfield, Mass, the Green River Fest this weekend, and 2 sold out shows at Beacon Skiff. And hopefully I'll be back in time for Saturday with Waxahachie, but really excited that it can keep going. When it was me and a laptop years ago, I never saw this day coming, but I'm really happy that we've gotten here.
Dude, it's been amazing to watch it happen. And, yeah, sure, some of it is, we all have luck, but I mean, I would say 99% of your success has been your hard work, dude. You've been grinding since the day I heard of you and met you, and it's paying off. And I love seeing good people succeed, and just keep doing it. Do you have? I mean, at this point, is there someone left that you're like, I really like? This is the dream artist.
Oh yeah.
Who do you got?
Tons of them. There's tons of them. I mean, so it's the ones who choose when and where they play, right?
Yeah.
Like Neil Young, decides when he plays. Would I love to do a Neil Young show? Sure.
Oh
Would I love
God.
for Eddie Vedder to say, I'd love to come back to Ithaca? Sure. Would I love for Tom Waits to play a show? Sure. There's millions of those, but so Chris Mazur, as you mentioned, does our design work. And he did this ad a couple of years ago where I'm never really one for like microphones or like, guitars or any of that kind of stuff. I think it's kind of cheesy if you use that, but it was a really simple thing, this little tiny microphone. And in the background is all the acts we've worked with in tiny little letters. And I can just stare at it and be like, oh my God, I don't even remember. And it's mind blowing to me just how many people we've worked with over the last whatever years, like walking in the State Theater box office and seeing all those posters of the people we booked. It's a really humbling experience. And you can't, you're as a promoter, you're living in the future so much. Like you could ask me who's playing next weekend and I'm going to have to think. Right. But if you tell me what I'm working on for January, February, March, that's where I am right now.
Right.
Even next summer, we're always ahead, and people ask, what's coming up? What are you excited about? I'm like, I can't tell you because I haven't booked it yet. Like that's where my head is working. Like, how do I steer the ship? But, so it's a tricky thing in that way too. Like you have to have these, we're working on a very cool, lots of really cool stuff right now. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, man.
But I'm excited for the weekend, rest of the summer for, all the stuff at Beacon Skip. It's a great relationship. just south of Syracuse there. Wonderful location, 4,000 cap, beautiful venue where people can come with families and have a good day, you know. So we're excited for, we got country shows, Primus.
Yeah, you've got,
what else?
I got it right. I wrote some down. You've got, I was going to say, before we go, I want you to hit up the plugs I mean, there's so many. Father John Misty, Kurt Vile, Graham Nash, Primus, Rainbow Kitten Surprise, Dark Star Orchestra, Lake Street Dive, Cowboy Junkies, Roseanne Cash, Ex-Ambassadors, Modest Mouse. I mean, that's just a sum that I wrote down. Anything you want to plug?
That's all over too. Those are all over the place. Some of those are in Rochester and Buffalo and whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I just say check the website. We're really we send an email once a week. Once a week on Wednesdays. We don't harass you with stuff unless you ask to be. But once a week, and then you get passwords. You can buy tickets early when you're on our list, and there's lots of good reasons for it. We try to keep it friendly and fun, and that's the goal. I think that. Our growth, like I said, has been beyond my wildest dreams, but I'm really having fun with it, and I don't see it. I don't see it changing. I think we're just going to keep developing these relationships. Like seeing bands like Waxahachie grow from club shows to selling 4,000 tickets in advance is pretty awesome, and it feels like a band we're going to work with for a long time, and in a lot of other places. Same thing with Mount Joy. Watching them blow up has been really fun. They're headlining the festival with Courtney Barnett and Waxahachie. So a lot of stuff that we're doing at the fest also is playing, around. So it's just how our growth. I mean, I look back, it was like I'd get a call from an agent and be like, give me the avails for Ithaca for, I don't know, not to go back to Lyle, but Lyle in May 1st to 5th. And now it's like, Lyle's coming to the Northeast in March. Where do you want to do it? So we send Ithaca, Buffalo, and across the Western Mass and wherever. So you send 6 or 7 offers and maybe you get 4 or 5 of them. And it's just, that's how the growth happens. You just do little runs of dates. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's good to have these conversations because you and I met at a different time, and we certainly found ways to, have you open shows with your band, with your comedy, wherever, I think, and you've worked hard, and to finish dispelling that myth, it's like, we want to give those opportunities on every show that we possibly can. But who's going to get them? Who's going to get them? They're the people who work hard, who bring a professional game, and are, granted, we're putting you on the bill sometimes because we need to sell a few more tickets to not get hurt.
It's the name of the game.
We know you're going to work hard, right? I mean, there's no sense just showing up saying, oh, it's a Dan Small show, I don't have to work. No, we put you on that show because if you help me sell another 50 tickets, I'll lose $200 or $300 less than the $700 I'm going to lose on that show. Exactly. And I can't tell you, like I said, booking those shows that are going to lose are part of the game. And you have to be willing to do that, because you never know when of them is going to be the one that sticks to the wall, right? So 100%. That's where the local relationships come in as well. And I wish we had a little bit better relationship in with some of the Ithaca folk, but they all grow up and they'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out.
Maybe someday I'll be the John Peterson that he is.
You will, and you'll have your own place though, man. You may have, been influenced by John and all that, but you've done things your way and you've made a name for yourself. And he says that. I'm so grateful that you're in the area. I do have to ask you one last thing, and that is, I got this as I was thinking about this before the interview today. I'm like, shit, you don't ever plan on like going, I'm gonna uproot and move this whole thing like across. Like we need you in Ithaca, man. You're not going anywhere, are you?
No, it's very territorial. That's a really good question, because the industry is very territorial. I'm not going to move into Chicago and take the shows away from the local promoters there at all. It's not going to happen. So we're based in our markets. Those are there's respect for those markets among the industry, for the most part. There's people who challenge that all the time, and that's okay. That's how it goes. But I think from our perspective, Ithaca is our home base.
Awesome.
No, people know we do the shows there. We knew, the States are home away from home for like theater shows, and Western Mass, Northampton, Amherst. That's definitely our second home away from home. But yeah, no, we're not going anywhere. I love living here. It's been a great place to raise a family.
Heck yeah, man.
It's the lifestyle is, you're in a city, you own this club, you gotta feed the beast every night because your rent is so crazy. Like, sure, we want to do more shows at the state, but we can only do so many, right? Yeah. There's only so many nights a week that people aren't going to say, I'm going to go see Elvis Costello and not, calling hay or whatever, because it's just, I can't do both. You can't put people in that position. So we don't have to do that every night. I think that leads to a better lifestyle. It gives you time to be a good family, person as well, which is important to me. It's
100%.
It's good to have balance in life. And luckily we're still bringing big names into small towns.
Sure are, man.
That's a really cool thing.
I've been at all these shows you're talking about, and again, I appreciate it. Dan Smalls presents, dspshows.com. I'm signed up for the mailing list. Make sure you sign up, because like he said, they don't inundate you with garbage email. I mean, it's once, what'd you say, once a week, right? Once a week, once a month?
Wednesdays at noon.
Wednesdays at noon, I get a list of everything
the new
going on.
shows. Here's the passwords for pre-sales. Here's the shows that were coming up next week. Here's some stuff down the road. Take it or leave it, Yeah.
So, absolute last, you golf yet? I know you love to golf like me. Have you been out yet?
Oh, I do. I have. This year has been terrible. My kid's been out a few times, but I haven't. But I will be back. I'm still. Last summer I might have gotten out 8 or 10 times. The end of the last year, the handicap was really low. In single digits. One or
look
two.
at you.
I'm stuck with that now because I had it, and it takes a long time to go back up. So anyone wants to make money now, play me on my handicap, and you're gonna win.
All right,
right.
I'll take you up on it.
I would love to play some golf with you,
dude. I would. Let's do that.
Once we get past this, I have a feeling Wiley will have his future figured out in August, which leaves the whole fall to play lots of golf. So,
awesome.
Pretty excited about it.
Hit me up and we'll do it, man. Thank you, Dan. Seriously, thank you personally for taking the time to come on the show. Thank you for putting on all the shows you do, and I really appreciate you, and I'm always supporting you. So dspshows.com.
If things come up, I'm always happy to come back and talk about them.
All right, my man.
The fun stuff. Like, I'm at the age now where I want to give back and find the next people who want to do what I do.
I love that.
And we're training them at the company, but I think there's room for them in other places too. And that's the next phase, right? To give back's what it's all about. All right, man. Well, cool. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for letting me do it from the road.
Of course.
It would have taken a lot longer if we were in person. So.
Absolutely, man. Dan Smalls, thank you so much.
You got it, dude. Thanks for everything.
All right, brother. All right, that's it for this episode of Good News York, brought to you by Ads on the Go. GetAdsOnTheGo.com. I'm Mike Brindisi. Thanks for tuning in this week. Next week, we've got so many guests, so many things going on. You can check us out at goodnewsyork.com, and anywhere where you can watch or listen to podcasts, we're there too. So we will see you next week.